I'd like to welcome you. We're going to be talking about transforming crisis. We seem to live at a time when everything is creating crisis: international, domestic, political, presidential, and even in our day-to-day lives. And the question is, how do we get into all these crises? What can we do so that we're not consumed by our crisis? Sometimes we wake up and we don't appreciate how much choice we have in the crisis that we choose, because we actually choose many of our crises because we've actively participated in them. So my idea is, let's take a step back from all of our crises, get our ego and emotions out of the way, and see if we can objectively look at this crisis and say, how can we change it? So we stop the patterns that create them. And to do that, I've listed some things here that we're going to go down. Now, it's always in the question that I believe that we learn, not always in the answer. I give the answer to you. I only can give you some ideas of what I consider how to formulate the thought process, how to get it started. Then make some notes and take it over from there. Don't assume that what I'm telling you is anything that you have to adhere to. It's just a suggestion. The question's what's important, because we never think always of the question that could give us like the key to get out or get another perspective. How do we live and experience an integral life? Integral means what? What does it mean? Integrated. What are we integrating?
What's essential?
Our work,
Our work,
our
relationships, family.
Social concerns.
Everything that we are a part of is integrated. That is integral. Here in New York, there's a health food store called Integral Yoga Institute, where they try to integrate body and mind and spirit, and through the foods they offer and the classes in yoga. It's a unique concept, but it shouldn't be unique. It should be standard. But it's not standard, because if we're not living an integral life, what we're living is a piecemeal or fragmented life. And whatever isn't integrated is going to be a source of conflict. So right off the bat, we take a look at our life. We take a step back and say, all right, what in my life is not integrated? Then, how does that lack of integration impact upon how I feel? Because anything that creates disharmony creates conflict. Anything that creates conflict leads to crisis, either emotional or physical or psychological or environmental. So sometimes the answer is right in front of us and we're looking way over here for the answer. It's right in front of us. So look at your life and see how integrated or non-integrated it is. Then, what or who creates or influences our beliefs? Because if your life is integrated, it's frequently because your beliefs have encouraged it to be integrated. If you're not integrated, it's because your beliefs or individuals have conditioned you to believe that you didn't need to be living an integrated existence. In the 1960s and 70s, America began a social experiment, and it was unique in that my generation, many of you in your late 30s, 40s, early 50s, we believed that the system by which we were living was corrupt, that it was unethical. We believed that our mothers had given away their power to the authority figures within our society. We believed that they were not being treated equally, and they were not. We believed our fathers were keeping quiet on important social issues. They weren't speaking out against racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, and failure for proper disbursement of profits made in the corporate world, and we were right. They were not participating. They were only existing. And the only reason they were able to exist without being bankrupt is because our parents sacrificed everything for us. And to maintain our future, they gave up a lot of theirs. That's an enormous thing to do for someone. It takes a lot of love and commitment to make those kind of sacrifices. But they did. Our generation has sacrificed nothing. We've been the most greedy bunch of bastards in history. I mean, we want it. I want it now, tomorrow. Buy it, steal it, take it. We have no ethic, of course people do. But as a group, we have made and spent on ourselves more money than any group in world history, and we have less to show for it, certainly less happiness. Instantaneous pleasure, but no sustained pleasure, and certainly no spiritual growth to go with it. So what our parents didn't have, control over the society in which we live, an input into that society, they at least had some control and input over their own lives, and they lived well within their means. They actually had savings. Isn't it rather ironic that today the people who didn't go bankrupt, didn't have to give up their home in the Hamptons and their Armani suits are our parents. They're living in Florida, Texas, or California, frequently retired on small savings and small pensions, but they found happiness in smaller issues than we did. We looked for happiness in the big issue, changing the world. But we started off idealistically. We didn't start off greedy. We wanted to share the wealth. We just forgot about that when we started to get wealth. Then we didn't, why should I give it to the poor? I made it, they didn't. And so we forgot about our liberal views, and we forgot about our philanthropy, became very self-absorbed. To the degree that we had a sense of commitment, it was because we were conditioned to believe in things. But one day we woke up and we didn't believe in a whole lot. Most Americans became disillusioned because so many lies have been uncovered, and every week there was another lie being uncovered, just like right now in the news. There's another lie. It's just that we didn't know how to be the architects of using freedom in a responsible way. Our idea of freedom was get high, get laid, and drop out of everything for a while. And then be angry, but not reveal our anger constructively, turn it inwardly, and just do everything that we felt that we needed to do. And much of the time, it was against our own parents. Imagine what kind of misery we put our parents or other parents through by condemning them. We were very insensitive and very thoughtless, because how do you think they felt, knowing they did everything they could, right and wrong, to raise us by the convention they respected, and then we were the ones breaking free and condemning them? That's not a good way to communicate with someone if they have concerns, by denigrating. We forget now. The wound is healed. Our parents were very giving and forgiving us. But I remember only too well how many of the people I would talk with over and over again, the only way they knew how to communicate was through some form of denigration. That's why I stopped joining any of the movements, because I found that the people in the health movement, the anti-war movement, the vegetarian movement, loathed people in other movements or who weren't like them. And I thought, well, what's the difference between you hating someone and them hating you? There's no difference. Hate's hate. It's just that maybe they're more willing to be violent than you are. But there's an emotional violence. So I started to take a look at the way we had been brought up. And I took a respite from everyone and everything. I secluded myself. And I went introspective. I wanted to understand, how do we end up in the mess we are? And I didn't want to be a part of that mess. I didn't want to be like my parents and be victims, and I didn't want to be a part of my friends and be antagonists. I wanted to be part of a healing process. So I took a look at all that my family was, the best that it was, and the worst that it was. And what they believed in that allowed them to feel whole or fragmented came from their families and their teachings, and there was no one good and bad. Depending upon their teacher or who helped them, they either had some things that made sense and some not, but they didn't know how to separate it. It was kind of an all or none. This is the way it is, this is the way we live, this is the way we eat. So it wasn't as if, well, we have an aunt that was a vegetarian and she said to eat some, so we didn't eat some of the things she suggested. It was meat and potatoes, and that was it. Or if you went to church, everybody went to church. Even if you didn't want to go to church, you hated being in church, everybody went to church on Sunday. And you sat there and you tried not to be caught falling asleep. But that's the way it was. That's the way we lived. We didn't allow for relative expression. We were tolerant, but our tolerance still honored an obedience to society. Until we broke through, and then we weren't obedient to anything. Trouble is, we weren't free for something greater than that which we were opposing. We were merely in a vacuum. We were just angry. And we expressed it in different ways. Some colorfully, some creatively, some sadistically. Everybody had a different way of showing what they were against, but very few people had a way of showing constructively what they were for. Small group were more idealistic. You'd find them out at Esalen in California, or Fenhorn in Scotland, or some of these spiritual retreats, or down at the farm in Tennessee, or some of the first co-op movements, or some of the first women's health collectives. These were the more positive things that took something from all this and built it. But most people didn't. Most people went right back into that belief system. So that's what influenced their experience. Their parents influenced their experience, their society influenced their experience, and therefore that's how they end up living a more integrated or non-integrated life. Even the people who were in the so-called alternative movements at the time weren't integrated. They would eat vegetarian food, but then they'd do drugs. You know, they'd do drugs and vegetarian food, but then they weren't a part of the political process. They would be angry, but only a relatively small percentage of Americans ever protested against any political effort in our country. At the height of the Vietnam War, only 500,000 people were out there protesting. So we had many Americans angry, but not constructively seeking change. They were immersed in their own life process, and that's all that mattered to them, their own life. Then they went right back into the very society that they loathed and became a part of it. So they didn't learn a lot from this experience, but at least we know why they went back in, and we know how they went back in and what they became. They became what they feared. They became their parents, but with an attitude. Now, how do your thoughts, experiences, and decisions and feelings and needs affect your beliefs? Let's break this down. What you do, if you're going to become a vegetarian, or if you're going to jog, or if you're going to go see an alternative therapist, or if you're going to become a careerist in a healing field, it's frequently because of what you believe in. Now, there's two ways of doing that. Either what you have created as a belief, something you want with passion and a sense of inner dynamic to believe in, or what you've been conditioned you should believe in, or sometimes a combination of the two. But there's no clear demarcation there, because if our father denied us motivation or our father pushed us beyond normal motivation, both can have the same effect. We can end up doing something and not realize we're very successful today because of either a lack of commitment or too much commitment to become successful. Both can end up causing a successful person. Doesn't mean we're happy, just successful at what we do. And we've mismeasured success by what we've accumulated instead of how we've grown, and that what we do with our success, how we share it, how much of our life it consumes when we feel that enough success is enough. And that's based upon our beliefs. So one day you wake up and you say, all right, I am a series of beliefs. My whole being is a series of beliefs. Well, what does that mean, practically speaking, as to how I change or evolve or live day to day? Now you break the question up to this. How do your thoughts affect your belief? Well, what I think directly becomes a part of what I do. I think that our system is corrupt. My belief is that I can change that system by not voting for bad people, sponsoring good people, boycotting companies, products, or processes that I feel my beliefs cannot support. So I'm honoring my beliefs with my thoughts, keeping my thoughts positive, or keeping them honest on issues. So let's say, for instance, someone says, where are you going to live? Well, I'm going to go out to Sedona. Why are you going to go to Sedona? Well, because I don't want to be around, crime and pollution. Well, you're also making a statement that's highly racist and inhumane. You're saying that all those people who cannot afford to live in Sedona are part of the problem, and therefore you're not a part of the solution. Well, now we have 28 million Americans living in gated communities. These are nice, pretty, well-manicured, guarded communities, walled communities that generally have a lake and a country club, and it takes anywhere from $300,000 up to $3 million to live in them. And there's very little crime, but there's a lot of dysfunction. There's no less anger inside those communities than there is in the ghetto. The difference is that the environment looks different. But then that's making a statement about everyone who doesn't have the same advantage. Well, look at the life energies. Very few adaptive, supportive energies. What makes 85% of the American population are adaptive supportive. They work in the post office, they work as sanitation workers, they work, as secretaries, they plow and your corn, they milk the cows, they're your hair cutters. These are people that are the functionary support system of the world. If we didn't have them doing their job consistently and patiently and loyally, you would have a society that would dissolve into anarchy overnight. Imagine if you didn't have anyone pick up your garbage for a month. Think of the pestilence that would happen. What if no one grew your food? You're going to grow it? You don't know how to grow anything. What are you going to do? You're going to hire someone? Well, who are you going to hire? Because only the adaptive supporters you're going to be able to hire to do it. We don't appreciate what it means when you turn on the water to have it come out. When you're in a building, an apartment building, and you got hot water, someone makes that water hot. Your elevators run, someone built the elevator. You didn't build it, someone built it. You didn't maintain it, someone maintains it. You walk out at night, you're going to see lights. Who maintains and changes the light bulbs? Now, I might not like how many people it takes to change a light bulb, 47 people in New York City to change a light bulb. And 2,700 to contemplate it, but at least someone's doing it. Well, they're not being invited to go to any of these gated communities. They don't get in because they're not out there making their success monetarily at the expense of honoring their social commitment. If you just give them a nice apartment in Queens or Brooklyn and used to in Manhattan, but now they've been forced out of Manhattan. The interesting part of this is their parents, adaptive supportives, lived in Queens. The adaptive aggressives made enough money by mortgaging or selling their parents' home, getting their parents to go to Florida so they could come into Manhattan, displace an adaptive supportive who lived here for years. So now you don't have adaptive supportives able to live in Manhattan. You have to be wealthy to live in Manhattan. It's interesting how the life energies are affecting all this. I can always see things from the life energy point of view. But now imagine who's not getting into the gated communities. Most people never think of this, right? They think, oh, anybody can come and live here. Oh, really? See if anybody can go live in one of the buildings on Fifth Avenue, Park Avenue in the co-ops. No. And who has the money to live in these places? So what we do, we actually perpetuate a problem by not taking a step back to see how we are part of its solution, because we don't see we're part of the solution. Now, does that mean everybody should move back to the ghettos? No, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting we should put our energy in helping take one area at a time, commit ourselves to something that we can actually change, and then focus upon using our intellect, resources to help change something. I'm not saying change the world, because the idea is, well, if you can't change at all, don't work at all at change. So we like to think, well, we can't help anybody because there's too many people who need help, so why bother at all? But if you help one person, it's one person. What if you were that person? What if it was your brother, father, mother that someone was caring enough to help? Then suddenly that becomes an important help. So think of all the people who could help one person, who could make a difference on an issue, who could gather other energies together and go in and take in a ghetto and make a ghetto back into a place that's safe to live for the people who are there. Because ghettos only become ghettos when the other life energies abandon it. Because they don't have dynamic energies. Without dynamic energies, all systems fail. No business can succeed without a dynamic energy. So that's why your thoughts, thinking more than just on a mono thought, not just thinking about yourself or what's in it for me or what do I lose, but stopping and thinking more integrated. Go back to the concept. I'm now thinking integral. Do you see what I'm saying? Because most of our thoughts are not integral thoughts. They're isolated thoughts. They're single thoughts. We only want instantaneous gratification, instantaneous result of a problem. Give you an example of how this works. And this is not a criticism of BAI, but I talked with the program station manager, Valerie Van Isler, nice woman, about the programming at BAI. During the fundraising, it sounds like every premium is a health premium. If you listen, it's all health. And the programming is very much health programming now. Well, if you look at the ratings, here's the normal programming, and then zip, my hour, and then back down. So they built shows around my hour, but they built all health shows. Well, in the short term, they made more money because what was happening, my audience began to order premiums in other shows. But at the end of the year, the ratings for the total listening of the audience, more people coming on didn't. Only people I was bringing over primarily from WEVD, my Sunday night show. Now, if you took instead and put a completely different show, one that could bring its own audience and still serve the needs of the charter BAI, and that had its own voice, its own premiums, so that every hour was different and every premium was different, then what you would have a healthier station in the long term, because each hour built its own audience, just as I did when I came on this show. No one was listening when I first came on. And I was on the dead hour, noon. They put me at noon because there was no other hour bad as noon. No one wanted it because it's a dead hour. No one's listening. So the short term was make money now. We're in crisis. Program now for crisis, but no long-term concept to build a stronger, more viable station, which means you may have to sacrifice immediately to have a strong future. But that's what we do in almost every part of our society. We want it now, but not the sacrifice. We don't like the sacrifice because we don't look at the long-term planning. And then we keep perpetuating crisis. We wonder, gee, today's a day, and now I'm fat, and I got a heart attack, I got a stroke, I've got breast cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer. Why? Because you look towards a short-term solution. I'm angry, I want a food now. Oh, vegetarian tomorrow, fast, I'll detox, meat now. Oh, anger now, not resolving it. I'll wait till this summer, I'll go away and do a stress management weekend, but right now I'm stressed, don't know how to deal with it, so I'll yell and scream. So we keep avoiding and postponing fundamental change to integrate our life, to get away from these temporary piecemeal solutions that don't work. It takes sacrifice and commitment to fundamentally change your life to make it integrated, because that means you have to acknowledge what parts are not integrated and pull them back into the integrated whole, and then balance each one, because integration also means balance.